Welcome to Our Drummers Musicians, your backstage pass to Melbourne's vibrant music scene. Recorded on a cosy couch in Brunswick, join us as we explore what it truly means to be a musician and speak to the diverse talents that make music in our city. Today on the podcast, we're joined by Joseph Batrouney, an Australian Lebanese percussionist based in Melbourne. His music mirrors his unique upbringing and journey through the realms of Middle Eastern, jazz, and flamenco music. Joseph views his musical expression as a reflection of how people form unique mosaics of self through their experiences. Joseph has studied under notable musicians like Tony Moreno in the USA, Piraña Suarez, and Bandolero in Spain, and Simon Barker in Australia. He's also a graduate of Monash University and New York University. Some noteworthy performances include appearances alongside the Melbourne Chamber Orchestra at Café Berlin in Madrid, and with Art Canela Flamenco on both national and international tours. Last year, Joseph released his album At Hand. The album, deeply rooted in his diverse musical influences, features intricate rhythmic textures and a commitment to expressive musical storytelling without relying on virtuosity alone. His approach to music is about creating something meaningful that can be shared with anyone, where the complexities are like Easter eggs for those keen to find them. On this album, he collaborated with local musicians Jacques Emery and Flora Carbo and Niran Desika. He is also active in organising local music events and performs regularly with various artists in Melbourne, contributing to the vibrant music scene. Aside from his performances, Joseph is passionate about teaching and nurturing a healthy relationship with music amongst his students. Join us as we discuss Joseph's journey with music, his breadth of global influences and experiences, and his unique flamenco cajon set. We want to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Joseph, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What is the most recent album that you've listened to?
An album called Vida by Josemi Carmona, this Spanish guitarist.
I wanted to ask you about your time in Spain. Is he one of the artists that you got to know whilst you were over there?
He would come in and out of this studio I would practice. I practice at, because it was the studio of one of my teachers that you mentioned, Bandolero.
Mm-hmm.
I never really got to know him though personally. I just kind of see him coming in and out and having a laugh outside. He'd also come to Melbourne on tour, I think, with a Spanish flautist called Jorge Pardo. And when he was in town, again, I think he hosted a guitar workshop, but I was just kind of there to see his percussionist, Bandolero, when he was in Melbourne too. So I haven't really spent a lot of time talking to Josemi, but he's an interesting one because I think his harmonic understanding of jazz has kind of enabled him to not fuse, but I guess, let's say, I don't know, use ingredients from both flamenco and jazz music to make his own records. Mm-hmm. And he was in this really famous Spanish band called Ketama, which is like a pop band.
Okay.
But he still kind of used a lot of, I think, pretty interesting harmony in. And then his own stuff is really cool because, I don't know, to me, the percussion that Bandolero records, it's somewhere between worlds. And he's really, to me, it's so tasteful how he does it, and it's always supportive, but at the same time, never bland. Yeah.
Your music is so interesting in that same respect, I suppose, to me.
Thank you.
Like, that between two worlds phrase, and like using different influences and different experiences to not be playing something other than just music, I guess. And it's the in between, the grey, and I guess slightly different to like a true like fusion. What was it that I guess sort of got you started into that area of playing like music that touched on lots of different elements rather than like pursuing just jazz or flamenco or some Middle Eastern drumming, or becoming like a Spanish drummer?
So happenstance was really the biggest thing for me, because I'd never really made a conscious effort to be one drummer or the next, one percussionist or the next. I guess I was just responding to things that inspired me at the time. Like, I remember the moments pretty clearly that have sparked interest in any sort of rabbit hole that I've gone down. So in the sense of, I remember the moment I saw Johnny and Chantel playing percussion for one of the lecturers at uni here and at Monash, and just going, what is this world they're coming from? Like, what is this rhythmic code that's going on? Because they're improvising, I can see that, but there seemed to be some sort of structure there that I couldn't really pick. And I was in peak kind of rhythm nerd phase of like, oh, what's going on here? What's going on there? And checking out like people like Tane at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that group, Nick Barsh's Ronin, that I was listening a lot to at uni. So I was really unpicking it all in that world of rhythmic kind of science. And I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out what the hell was going on at this gig. So I naturally kind of followed that. And that's what ultimately led me down this flamenco rabbit hole.
Wow.
And the same with, I guess, with Arabic music. I mean, I kind of had grown up listening to it at my grandparents' house, and there would be some drummers at events, and I just couldn't really find it in my day-to-day life, and I didn't really chase it either, because I was just enamored with drum kit at school and learning about the instrument and how to get each limb to work, basically.
Yeah, well, that was my first exposure to you, being like an excited Year 7 student watching you, the like super talented megastar of the high school drum program.
Wow. No. Thank you though. No.
Well, that's my memory of it.
True.
And I think that we were lucky to come from a school that had this long line of like amazing drummers. And like Paul Matcott was a great teacher.
Definitely.
And at least for me, it was like, wow, like, oh, Joseph's like this guy I want to like watch all of the performances and do all the stuff. And then once you left, I was like, oh, now I've got to fill the shoes of like this guy and all the bands. This is wild. And then I think to what you're playing like is now, and how you've really just done like amazing things with creating a really unique voice and sound, and like even the drum kit that you play. Would you mind describing that, I guess, for like some listeners, like the cajon flamenco, like sort of like hybrid drum kit, I suppose, and how, maybe a bit more, however you want to describe it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's really kind for you to say. I guess it all kind of started with this residency I was doing with Johnny and Richard and Chantel at Canalaba on Johnson Street. And I remember Richard went to Spain, the guitarist went to Spain, and Johnny said, I was learning from him at the time, learning cajon, and he said, do you want to do the shows? So we pieced together a show, and I started playing drum kit, actually, flamenco drum kit, but sitting on the cajon.
Mm-hmm.
And the stage, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's there anymore, but the stage was tiny. So, and there are two dancers. So basically I had a third of the stage and there was a third each for the other dancers, which wasn't right. So over the course of, I think, a few years, I would gradually strip back the drum kit.
Okay.
And I remember the first gig I did with just cajon was very much, it was scary. I felt very naked. And the audience, like, the stage was raised, but the people at the restaurant or the audience were sitting down right in front of me. Just kind of very, very nerve-wracking. Because I'm used to the wall that the drum kit offers, the wall of toms, the wall of cymbals. And so from there, I kind of started adding to the cajon rather than just deciding this is the new setup.
Right.
And it was a strange thing because I think I remember just before I started playing at that bar, I had a lesson with Simon, and he had said basically focusing on one thing, one language, one idea, and developing it is going to form kind of like that's what forms the foundation for, like, I guess, your music as an individual. I'm paraphrasing it, not doing it nearly as much justice as he did, but it was really inspiring for me at the time, and I kind of worked on this small little world, and I just found in playing with other musicians that the more I forced it, the worse it would sound. Actually, with this kind of hybrid kit setup,
right?
Really weirdly, actually. So I would kind of bend and flex, add and subtract, and eventually I think I've just been able to strip it down to something that, at least for now, is working for me. But I just play at the moment I'm practicing on and playing a really small bass drum. It's like 16-inch, but it's got a goatskin head made by this guy in Spain called Requena is the mark.
Mm-hmm.
And I play just a normal hi-hat, some bells on it or whatever, and a small Sona Jungle snare drum with, like, they've got those cool little tambourine things in there.
Cool.
And so basically the idea is, like, to put the long story short, the idea was it's the I guess the ingredients that matter more, which was left foot, right foot, keeping the kind of sentiment of that four-way coordination stuff of the drum kit alive, and having the cajon as an option, which offers like a short, punchy bass, which I like, a clean kind of cajon bass sound, and also its own woody kind of weird snare thing, and the ability to kind of almost sound like a shaker when it's just simmering away. And then having other colours to support with maybe even a longer bass drum tone, like a kind of short, bitey, toppy snare, and also having like the ability to kind of hold it down with the left foot as well when needed. But yeah, the idea very much being that it's coming from the cajon, and like I'm not shortchanging the fun and torture also at times of having the four limbs kind of talking to each other. But also coming from a place, Luke, of like the drum kit for me it's still so fun, like traditional kind of American drum kit. It's not broken. The language around that is in no way broken. There's nothing that I can or would ever want to change or fix about it as it exists. This hybrid kit that I'm playing is more of an exploration of, like, I guess kind of like a test for myself, like how far can I take this? What can I do with this? And I'm not the only one there. I'm seeing many every day. I'll see someone on Instagram doing something absolutely terrifying on some sort of hybrid setup. But for me, just keeping those principles alive of short, long, and keeping motion and rhythm kind of intertwined has been really a fun journey.
So it's like a guy who liked, diving down rabbit holes of drums. Most drummers often will go down like a real technical rabbit hole of like chops or, technique or something. You seem to have maintained like a real sonic interest, I guess, if I could describe it like that, like sounds and textures And yeah, you've got the like technical chops and like stylistic capacity to play lots of different things practically. But I suppose like the musical element side of it, rather than like a the almost like athletic gym side of drumming, is not really there. It's that the musical and the creation of sounds and things that's interesting. And I wondered, is that just something that is you that's come out, because that part of it has always been interesting to keep it like musically connected, I guess, rather than just getting the muscles to do coordination and technique? Or was there some people that said things to you that resonated and made you or assisted you to go down some rabbit holes of exploring like textures and sounds and all the different styles?
Yeah, I try really hard to not go too far down that route of the show-offy kind of, hey, here's what I can do. Which, I mean, some people really like that. It's just, and I actually really like when some other drummers do it. It's just, I guess it's not my taste when I'm playing, and when I try it, it just doesn't feel right, or maybe it doesn't feel as solid, or basically I think that the overall effect that my playing can have on the music is maximized when it's based in listening. And I hope that whatever stuff I'm putting down actually is coming from the place of serving the musical situation, rather than this preconceived feel that I've been practicing for ages. I mean, don't get me wrong, like my language doesn't develop without concerted effort and like a practicing of like this chop or that chop, or moving like between this gear and that gear. But yeah, it's basically because I've failed as the other musician. That's my answer. I failed to make super choppy, super flexy drumming work, both internally and externally. That means like people going, no, that didn't work, after gigs or rehearsals, and both me listening to, and also me listening back to my own recordings going like, it just doesn't catch. But definitely my playing with Johnny and Richard definitely helped with that, because I think there was something about playing with those guys that flamenco with them had this weird allergy to like any fluff. Like if it was fluff, it couldn't exist.
Okay.
It just didn't work. It somehow just seemed to ruin the music. And in rehearsals, they'd be like, that's just not working, that part. Like, because the thing is, you're not really present when you're doing that stuff. Or, I mean, I wasn't, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, you're kind of in your head of like, okay, is this it? But you're not listening in the same way. And like, maybe on the occasions I'd solo, it was a little bit more acceptable to do that. But like 98% of the time I was accompanying. And so like if I'm going for a chop when I'm accompanying, that's like a bit weird, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a little bit like, so I'm grateful that, even for you to say that it comes across that way, then that's like, it makes me happy. But yeah, definitely, same answer, like failed other drummer.
Well, if we go back to like the very start of music for you, was it like, you mentioned there being like drums around family events and things like that. Is that how you got started for the very first time, sort of playing drums or getting into music?
No, it was actually through high school. I remember there weren't spots in grade 6 where I wanted to learn the drums. And this was after, I think I was sick one day and I went into work with Dad, as you did back then, because like I think I had had enough of my grandma putting me to work when I was sick, maybe weed the garden. So I think I convinced Dad to let me go into work with him. And I don't know how he did it, but he could play a rock beat back then. So I was hanging out he was teaching at Canterbury Girls Secondary College, and he showed me a rock beat, I think at lunchtime or at the end of school one day, and I had to go. And I think it was kind of pivotal, that event, because I couldn't do it right-handed. He was playing right-handed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, whatever, I'll just try left-handed or open-handed. And it just kind of felt much more natural. And then flash forward to my first lesson at Bowen. And thankfully, Mr. Matcott didn't say, swap your hands around. That's not how you play the drums. He said, okay, well, you can play that way. I'm not going to change it. Just so you know, like, you're going to have to translate almost every piece of music I put in front of you now to be like left-hand lead what it needs to be and right-hand lead what it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the journey you'd be choosing. And I was like, to be honest, I didn't really care. I was like, well, I can't play the other way now, so I'm just going to take the easy option.
Yeah.
There were some translation things, there were some things to work through later when we were in our lessons, but yeah, it was really just through high school.
Wow.
That was when it all kind of kicked into gear.
Had you enjoyed music beforehand, like before you started learning the drums?
Yeah, I tried to learn guitar in grade 2.
Okay.
And I just thought, it's just too slow. And I mean, like many students, probably, the first few lessons are just, there's absolutely no connection between what you're doing in the lesson and the music you like. And I just they were like, you have to practice. I'm like, I remember just sitting on my bed, like with this student guitar and just kind of like, this sounds so bad. Like, I just can't believe this is going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just I don't think I had the right temperament to just sit down with the guitar in grade 2 for like 30 minutes and actually consistently work on that skill and get better. So that fell to pieces pretty quickly. And I had really liked music beforehand, but it wasn't like music was my thing at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt probably more into sport at that time, but I don't know how it happens. I don't really have that kind of amazing story that I hear a lot of musicians have when that lightning flash moment and they knew music was for them. It was more this thing of I'd put more effort in each year and I'd love it more each year as well. And it kind of hasn't stopped that way.
That's so special though.
Yeah, maybe it's in its own right. I mean, the way it kind of is like this little kind of thing that's with you as you grow up, especially through like adulthood and like teenage years, etc. It's nice to have this little kind of spirit animal along with you that changes as needed.
So what kind of music were you liking, I guess, in that journey, like through starting to play drums and like through high school before you were like, oh, I want to do a jazz degree?
I think it's funny you mentioned that whole like there's this drummer at the school and then now they're gone. Like I remember having to kind of step up to like one of the stage bands at school because the other drummer didn't get along with the music director at the for the other band.
Okay.
So I started listening to jazz kind of earlier because that was what the big band thing was about. So like some of the Gordon Goodwin stuff, some of the like it was a James Morrison track, On the Edge, that I had to play in my first year in stage band. And I just that was Andy Fissenden, I think, on that track. But
wow.
I would listen to a bunch of that. I was really drawn to Carter Beauford from Dave Matthews Band because, Mr. Matcott was like, he's another open-handed drummer. Like,
right.
You'll get a sense for like kind of, I guess that the whole, the way of negotiating the open-handed drum kit from him. Billy Cobham was actually another inspiration, like a big inspiration in high school. I had a lesson with Dave Beck when I was finishing school, and he played me Black Codes from the Underground, and I thought it was so bad. Like I didn't have the temper, and he played me some Four and More as well, with Tony Williams. So Miles Davis Four and More, that famous second quintet, and they were that was year 12, I think, but still, I really got a taste for like just pushing the instrument that far.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are insane, and I didn't understand. It only has dawned on me in the last few years, like what their language and the kit and what their level of fluency was like.
Mm-hmm.
But they definitely kind of, even though I hated Black Codes when I first heard it, and even some of the Four and More stuff, yeah, I just kind of kept coming back to it, kind of like the first taste of like some sort of acquired taste, rare kind of ingredient. You're just like, oh, that's weird, but kind of want some more.
Yeah.
And you just keep going until you're one of those people going, you have to try this. It's a delicacy kind of thing.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Well, so we can sort of like, skip through your time at Monash, because you sort of already spoken about that a bit, but what was it like then from finishing that and then, going to Spain? Like,
yeah,
wow.
So it was a bit of a trip. I broke my wrist just from a fall.
You didn't you like just before a recital or something?
Yeah,
like
so I had to
get
defer.
A sign?
I had to defer I was going to just go like 3 years, boom, on the dot. But I ended up with a fractured scaphoid, which is apparently that's the worst bone in your wrist to break. Not that there's a good one, but because it doesn't get a north-south supply of blood. So I had this thing called a non-union, which basically meant that it wasn't getting enough blood to really heal in an obvious way. So the specialist just said to me, we're going to have to operate, but you may as well go on this New York trip with Monash because it's not healing anytime soon. And so I went on the New York trip and came back, and I said, it's feeling kind of good. It's feeling a bit better. And it's like, oh, that's weird. Let's do a scan. And it started to heal.
Right.
So I ended up doing the recital, and luckily all went well. And I would go back kind of every 3 months, every 6 months or whatever it was. And he kept saying, yeah, it's healing a bit. It's still broken, but like, I don't want to operate until I have to.
Right.
And so it took, I think, just over 12 months for my scaphoid to heal properly. But it just it was a really interesting moment because it was around the end of my degree. And it was a real bubble bursting moment because I guess I'd been put on this weird trajectory of like pretty much just practicing and thinking of jazz especially as if it was all in this bubble, and you're kind of I think there's definitely a culture in jazz musicians of just practice super hard and like pour every ounce of your life into it and it will all work out.
Yes.
And I kind of didn't really question that a lot until I had this kind of wrist break, and I was like, I feel kind of weird, like I wasn't really practicing as much until I guess he told me it was healing. And I wasn't seeing my friends because I'd see my friends at rehearsals or at gigs, but I wasn't doing those. So I had a moment to really just take a breath and take a step back from the drums actually. And I guess in that there was, like I'm sure everyone has these moments where they really think a little bit more deeply about what they're doing on the drums and what music even means to them. And so after a while, I kind of, I decided that I really, really love drums and the music, but I kind of wanted to make it more my own like thing and resonate, I guess, a little bit more with the music that I loved, rather than kind of burning myself out to attain this stereotype that, was a shadow of a thought when I was at high school, but really, in terms of an industry, kind of doesn't exist in the same way. So it was kind of that quote like, you either break a stereotype to be who you are, or you break who you are to be the stereotype. I kind of chose the first option. So it meant I took a couple of lessons with Simon Barker, who's kind of the king of like carving out your own language. And I watched that documentary of his actually, Intangible Asset number 82. I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it. it's basically about his journey into Korean music, and a documentary kind of that follows his adventure into finding this Korean drumming shaman, which sounds kind of really wacky, but it's all done through the lens of, you know, like a salt of the earth, really intelligent Aussie drummer. And it's really it really moved me, and moved me at least to pursue my own thing. So I went to him for some lessons and started working on my own thing. And then I started learning cajon with Johnny Tedesco. And that was like, I thought I could play rhythm. It's like, I thought I was like kind of good, you know? And yeah, it turns out I would just like, there's nothing like playing with, I think maybe even there's something about the way dancers approach rhythm that's just weeds out like any fluff in your playing, anything that's not solid, anything that doesn't have some sort of embedded motion into it, motion and emotion. It's just like it's water off a duck's back. And I couldn't do it. I just couldn't really do it. Like I played, I think for four or so years, 2 nights a week at that bar.
Wow.
And I just, like after every show, we'd kind of talk about the music, and I just couldn't really do it. You know, I felt as if I was falling short. I think it was kind of like my first bout with, kind of like performance anxiety, where the more you think about it, the more you fear any mistake, the worse you spiral on stage. And so I just stopped. And I was like, this doesn't go anywhere, you know? And I decided to just kind of move to Spain for a bit to check it out. I had picked up some Spanish from the bar, and I'd done some lessons. And to get the working holiday visa thing, I had to also like prove that I had a certain level of Spanish, which kind of all turned out to be pretty useless, because by the time I got to Madrid, it was like 1,000,000 miles a minute, and I couldn't really keep up much. But it was an awesome thing. It was an awesome thing for me to have done. I didn't really stay there as that long, but I was just kind of living the life I wanted to there, which was, you know, I booked a studio. I would have lessons with this guy Bandolero every so often. They had this flamenco jam at this bar called Café Berlin, and so I'd go there, and it was really nice. I'd run to the studios. It was just a moment where I could I guess it was a kind of another bubble in a way, but it was the bubble, I guess, that I wanted to be in rather than the bubble that I thought I had to be in, and that I secretly had an expectation was going to lead me somewhere.
Yes.
This was just like, it's its own reward. So it was really, really fun. And I guess I was better at not putting the wrong kinds of pressure on myself and on music at that moment, because Spain's a laugh. Like the version of Spain I saw when I couldn't speak Spanish versus when I did speak Spanish, it's just so different. There's such a laugh with these people.
What do you mean by that?
Like everything is a joke. like almost at least every 3 sentences, like someone will put something that's designed to either be funny or lead to something funny, and the way they kind of make fun of each other is just funny. It's just also so funny. They call it like wasa, like if you have wasa. Like,
is it like banter, like that sort of thing, or something different that, you know, doesn't really exist?
It's kind of banter, but it never feels like you're kind of, I don't know.
You're not putting people down, I guess.
Doesn't
like
feel as malicious, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Which is funny, because you can say some things that just like, that's horrible, but it's I don't know, at least my feeling of it was, it's like you're kind of having a go at something else. It's not like the person.
Yes.
It's like this thing attached to the person that's kind of like, it's a bit more on limits.
So is there any part of you that, wants to go back? Or are you satisfied that like, no, that was a period of time and it's taught me so much and now I'm moving on?
I used to think that way when I got back. I was like, I got to go back. And then you work on yourself, you work on your music. And at least at this point in time, all I'm really thinking about is what I'm working on and the music I'm making and teaching well, playing well. Getting these shows, I'm working on some shows with Johnny and Richard and Chantel. Getting that sounding really good. But when I landed, I was hell-bent on going back. So my short answer is definitely open to the idea, but probably more invested in making music here that I guess that I want to, that I can. These musicians that I'm working with are really, really great. I'm kind of a little bit more part of the like Arabic Middle Eastern music world than I ever have been, which I'm really finding quite inspiring as well. So I'm happy.
Is that a new thing, I guess, like to be in that post the Spain trip?
Yeah. I wasn't in that world. It was basically after a conversation between my friend and a friend of a friend, and someone goes, do you reckon Joseph can like keep up? And my friend George was like, yeah, of course, like book him. And I was booked for this rehearsal. I had no idea what was going on. My Arabic's really bad. It was rehearsal all in Arabic, and I just didn't know what was going on. But one thing kind of led to the other, and I'm enjoying playing kit in that setting, or like percussion, depending on the setup of the gig. It's hard because some of the things I think are too much are actually not enough, and some of the things that I think are just nice and tasteful, it's like works out to be too much. So
right.
I think I'm learning a lot at the moment with where I'm at in that setting, with the like little crappy home studio I've got to really kind of stretch my own limits with the hybrid kit setup. It's really fun. Yeah,
like we were talking about like all the different music that you're doing, and last year you put out your album. You actually play guitar. Is that right? Like on all of it.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize for ages after listening to it. Only prepping for this, and I was like looking for who the guitarist was, and then realized it was you, which is just amazing that you've clearly worked so hard at your guitar chops to be able to pull that off, as well as the like super interesting percussion. What was that like process like, I guess, of making that record?
So it was blood from a stone. It was unique in the sense that I was pretty clear on what each piece, like how I wanted it to feel. I guess you could say like the emotional signature or something of each piece. So it just took ages for me to find the chords, find the notes, find the patterns, to be able to kind of do that story, emotional tone, whatever you want to call it, a justice. I guess the reason I did it on guitar though was because I wanted to explore some of these rhythms, and I didn't have enough money to really pay someone to like go through it with me, and I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it without money, because it was like, this song does this, no, don't do that. And I don't enjoy music that I've made, and I have done a project where I've been a little bit more dictatorial. It seems to not work as well for me.
Okay.
I don't think it sounds as good, and that's just me. Like, I just wasn't happy with. It's kind of like, I think something happens when people are playing, when there's something behind the notes that really resonates with someone. I think that person sounds their best. And you can't just tell someone when their notes are wrong, as the composer thinks, without like there being that, I guess, story or whatever behind it, or resonance behind it. So I didn't really want that. And I think I had tried with one guitarist a while ago, and it was like, yeah, it was kind of like, where's the chart? Like, if you want this level of specificity, like, you need to bring me the chart.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, yeah, but then they're just gonna like, their heads down, gonna be down in the page, just going like, oh, it's this, and then I got to do this. But the thing is, like, the reality is, like, I did want those things, so I just saw like, either spend the hours and hours writing a chart for someone to just kind of sound like they're reading a chart, like write some sort of a incredible poem that sums up the music, which is not in my wheelhouse, not even possible. Or yeah, just kind of do it yourself. Oh, there was a fourth option, is pay someone to just really spend the time with it, but I just, like, it wasn't feasible. So I just took the time with it, and it was almost like it was a really, really enjoyable process, because it came from this place of, I'm aware of the kind of emotional story. I'm aware of what this piece is and needs to do. Find it. And like, the guitar was so, I mean, every musician's got a story of the time that they picked up the thing that they don't really know about, and all of a sudden the music came like flooding.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we do get in the way with, I guess, making it overly cerebral. And this was just my moment to just go, all right, my home, my studio, my garage, my thing. Like, it was a really kind of calming, open-ended space for exploration.
Mm-hmm.
As cheesy as it sounds, it actually kind of afforded me the opportunity to get to the bottom of these songs, these pieces. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, what a journey.
It took so long though. Like,
yeah,
it was so, yeah. I maintain that I'm not at all a guitarist. I just was able to find the right signature or the right, like, kind of embodiment or whatever of these ideas. That's all.
Well, you made some really beautiful music, and it really captured, like,
thank you,
a really interesting, like, atmosphere and mood, and yeah. Personally, I think they're really cool. Yeah,
that's really kind of you. Thank you. It was a fun process.
Well, if we change gears a little bit, I know one of the other things you wanted to chat to me about on the podcast was music education. The theme of, like, I suppose, like, the experience of people, like, going through music school, or just, like, the memories of their music teachers at home has come up quite a lot on the podcast. But then also, like, the other side of, like, people being teachers, or people like me who tried to do teaching but found that, like, it wasn't really doing anything for them, or, like, the challenge of, like, what are we doing it all for, and either being, like, really passionate for it for, like, a particular purpose, or just as part of a process. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to, like, narrow you in onto, like, what it is that you feel, like, most passionately about.
I guess it's just for me, it's just that thing of, like, how to teach and talk about the drums in a way that creates this healthy relationship between students and music and the drums, and also is honest enough that it's not like, hey, yeah, you just work hard, practice your paradiddles, don't forget to start with your left hand, and then, like, off you go. It's like, I also think that hand in hand with that is also, you're training to be like these idols that exist in completely different contexts and times. And it just, I think, there are so many institutions and so many high schools and so many universities with drum programs, and they're not necessarily all churning out extremely passionate musicians, which I think is a bit of a shame, because it's like, well, I feel like drums are as open and beautiful as anyone wants them to be. So how I guess if there was, like, something to narrow it down to, it would be like how to do it well enough that actually inspires people while creating a clear and vivid picture of what they're in for as much as possible.
You mentioned, Joe, like, the conversation that you've had with lots of different peers of yours that have come through, like, a formal music education. and that there's been like a similar collective experience of it. And now that you're in the role of a teacher, what are you feeling like the current state is for young musicians that are going through like formal education processes and then perhaps coming at the other end not being passionate for music like they were when they started?
I definitely feel that there's a push towards the more, I guess, formal side of education. So the idea of having a drum student and kind of winging your own curriculum as you go based on what they want out of it and based on what is important, I guess, for the craft of drums and percussion. That's good. It's like accepted, I think. But both parents and I think institutions love the idea of it kind of mapping onto something a little bit more tangible for them. And, it's kind of no wonder that like by the time they're out of their more formal education years, they're like have these moments of, well, what do I want to do? Like what's the intrinsic value of it? Because they don't know how to value things like that they love necessarily about the instrument. It's always conditional on how it meets or maps onto these other things, which is so funny because that is part of being a musician. Like the irony is like, okay, yeah, that's cool. You've got your little band and like if it's meaningful to you and you're happy to keep doing it in the way that you're doing it and not get anything out of it, I think it's still extremely valuable personally. But everyone's got a different point. Everyone's got a different point at, I guess, what their return should be on something. And then I think it naturally, as people persist with their music, they kind of figure out where they want to sit on that scale in terms of time investment and return from it financially, in terms of whatever lifestyle they want to lead. But that push, I think, in education towards things that are, I guess, mapping onto something bigger and more tangible, I think it takes a really sharp teacher to be able to kind of go, hey, this is this thing and contextualize it this way, but also if you're doing this thing, like it's super valuable as well. And I guess the dance is what bubbles am I prepared to burst here? Like, because the romanticism of practicing music and being a young musician and working towards being a professional musician, that bubble is, I think it's extremely important. I don't think I would have worked nearly as hard if that wasn't there for me. That love, that romanticism, that bubble. Like you can't be going that hard at your instrument and the craft around it and all the like nerding out on the structures. At the time for me it was jazz, and then I guess later like flamenco and Arabic music, but you can't be doing that while you're worrying about like I guess supporting yourself as like an 18-year-old and like making sure that you're like all your finances are in order and making sure that you're up to date on every single bit of admin in your world and like making sure that you're saving for a car and a house. I mean, I guess that's under finances, but I just think that the bubble is necessary. But how to do that dance as an educator around like kind of saying, well, there are things outside of that bubble that may help you in the long run. And again, I'm sure that everyone will have this opinion saying, well, at this point it's probably time, at that point it's probably time, and it's definitely not a one size fits all. But I think more broadly speaking, for me, it's the idea that there is a discussion around that picture of like, okay, there's this bubble and that's going to do this, and then there's that bubble and that's going to do that.
When you're talking about like the bubbles and the romanticism, like, are you talking about like the romanticism of like the struggling artist that just is like doing their art and nothing else matters, or like the romanticism of like if you practice your instrument, then success will come?
I guess both, but I was thinking of it more as the second one.
Mm-hmm.
Just get really, really good, and then good things will happen.
Do you think that that's something that was like told to you consistently throughout your music education? You know, from like different teachers and institutions and stuff. Like the most important thing is just you practice and become excellent.
Yeah, I don't think so in high school. I think Mr. Paul Matcott he was really good at kind of setting this idea like, this is what it would take to get this good at that particular style, that particular thing. But that kind of ended there. It was nice. It's like, I was like, shit, I want to get good at that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I know what I got to do.
That, you need to do this, and that will take however many hours or years or whatever.
I just felt like it was
clear.
It was kind of clear, and it was like there were also these little kind of performance check-ins in lessons that were like, yep, that sucked. Like that thing we worked on, that wasn't up to scratch. So okay, and like you didn't need to say it. It was just like, okay, well, how's this going? Let's go through it. All right, well, no. And you're like, oh, okay, back to the drawing board a bit.
Yeah, can't do it. Clearly, I haven't practiced enough. I got to practice more.
Yeah,
it's kind of binary, I guess, where like it's like the output is based on how much work you've put in, and when it's laid out without any other like confusing layers, it's so clear. Like, okay,
so
to play
true,
this bar,
isn't it?
you need to practice the technique that's going to allow you to, you know, physically do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny. Like, I mean, we do need that. We need part of it to be, there's this kind of almost box ticking exercise to like learning your rudiments, the nuts and bolts of it all. And it's like then you kind of go, all right, but more advanced, like let's get more creative, let's abstract a few things here and then, let's take some rhythmic ideas to like another level, more advanced, blah, blah, blah. And then that kind of gets wrapped in this other kind of like, all right, but contextually in music, how's that going to work? And then that kind of gets wrapped in this other bubble of like, all right, well, like career-wise, where's it going to end? And you need to choose, like, ultimately you might need to choose something. And then there's this other layer of like, okay, if that's your life now, like, is that what you want? So I guess in that regard, as those bubbles kind of start to expand or like become more layered, I think that's the part that you can't really teach. That's the part that's based on experience and investing one's time and efforts into something. But
how do you wrestle with the conflict of being a teacher and wanting your students to practice the like tradition and technique and knowledge, but also not want to crush their like spirit for like pursuing music and being creative and it becoming a big part of their life and not just like something they did when they were at high school or something that they did for a little bit, but actually like both having the skills but also maintaining the passion?
Yeah, that's the question. I try to teach them what it is to take music seriously while having fun. Because if there's no fun to it, it's like, God, it's a drag. It's really hard to learn and like remember stuff. And it's, when I think about it, like all the rehearsals I've been a part of have been in bands that I still play with today. They're so fun. It's so great. And like they don't get that in the one-on-one like drum teaching classroom unless you know how to have fun and kind of go like, let's look at this. Okay, yeah, that was a bit weird. Yeah, and then there's got to be some humor there. Like if you lose that, you lose a bit of life. And if you're losing the life, then it's like, well, what is it? It's just something else. It's a spreadsheet. But also, yeah, that seriousness, taking it seriously and like, okay, you want to perform? Let's do this. Okay, well, it's in 2 weeks. And this is the thing you wanted to perform. Like, it's not going to just happen. And no matter how good your teacher is, they can't just give you the skills. This is, I guess, as many experiences as I can give students about or that are centered on the idea of sitting down with their instrument and just sitting through that discomfort of being crap, learning how to break it down themselves, and the discomfort that comes with it all, to finally, I guess it's the overcoming and the progress of the overcoming of their own insecurities and disbelief, and the progress of going, wow, yeah, that's actually, when I look at it like that, oh yeah, it is easier to, like, you can't fix a car while you're driving. You do need to just stop and put it up on a hoist, you know? That they're the ways I have found to be most successful, rather than just kind of trying to fast forward. The irony is that thing, like getting a student to find it, that's kind of the same adventure. Like a student finding the way to practice and the passion for music is the same as a teacher finding the way to get a student to do that. It's the same adventure. Just sit with it and go, oh yeah, that way didn't work.
So what was the experience like then at uni, and like, you know, the collective experience of what you chat to your friends about, like now looking back at, you know, you were at music school like, I don't know, 8 years ago. How do you feel about like that formalized like program of music education where it continues to be like quite scripted, and potentially there's lots of people that have gone on to then not make music?
Yeah, this is a good question. So the first thing I need to say is at uni we had Aaron Goldberg come. He was running a masterclass and doing some gigs with Monash students and his own trio in Melbourne. And it was kind of early in first year, and for whatever reason, and that's right, I was in JTC, and Dave Newdick, actually the trumpet player, kind of told us all to get up, perform, you know, don't be shy. And he's right, it was very, very, very true. And anyway, in the Goldberg workshop, I got up to play, and it was really bad. Like I think I must have played really quite bad. And, you know, everyone from uni was there, and just some sprinklings of like Melbourne's best kind of jazz musicians had just come to check it out. And I honestly couldn't really tell you exactly how I played or anything like that. I don't remember it, but he did blast me. And I remember thinking, yeah, that was intense. And it just felt really raw, as you kind of, anyone would. But this is not saying that what Goldberg did was okay, because I kind of maintain he definitely could have ruined music for anyone. But for whatever reason, and at that time, and it might have been different if it happened any other time, but I've really wanted to practice. I was about to go to New York with Monash, and I really wanted to practice. So I spent the time leading up to it in uni holidays practicing quite hard. And that was I guess it was a formative experience, but again, like that was fueled by like fear of embarrassment and just, oh my God, I'm going to New York. They're all going to be like Aaron Goldberg, say I'm like a baby again. And like, so that's probably something that's still a question mark for me, is like, and it's the whiplash thing almost. It's like, is it good? Is it good to kind of, I mean, is that type of pressure? I mean, I would never pass it on. I could never teach that way, but like, and is drawing out that kind of dark ambition in young drummers, like, was that a good thing to have happened to me? Because I wouldn't say my self-esteem as a drummer was very good after that, but that also made me want to practice a lot, and kept me on the drum stool a lot. So
I think it's interesting though that you said it also could have, you know,
ruined music for anyone. Yeah. I mean, my answer is obviously that wasn't good. I'm not going to teach like that, but that's my experience. Like I'm sure a lot of people argue differently.
Well, we've been playing this game on the podcast where I get each guest to ask a question of the next guest, but without knowing who the guest is.
Oh, cool.
So I've got a question for you from the previous week's guest, Alex Kwong.
Okay, cool.
He's like an EDM producer based here in Melbourne.
What is a, I guess, style of music or genre of music that you are embarrassed to say that you listen to and generally wouldn't tell anyone or want to tell anyone about it?
Probably, I don't know if I'm even really embarrassed. That's the thing. But there's this like kind of famous, super famous actually, like singer called Rosalia. And she's kind of like put the flamenco world in a spin because she's taken a lot of flamenco lyrics and styles and kind of modernized them, or some would say bastardized them.
Right.
And I just, from a production standpoint, I just listen to a lot of her songs. The ones that aren't super like reggaeton, because that's not so much for me, but I listen to a lot of her music. I'm like, yeah, like this sounds great. Like this production is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Is she a modern artist or?
Yeah. She's definitely up and at 'em now. Rosalia. She was on SNL. Was it SNL or like I forget what? But she's definitely around.
Okay,
definitely around.
But like a controversial figure, depending on which side of the musical camp you're on.
Yeah. Some people just think it's whatever. Like she's just someone making music the way. But yeah, I think she's kind of has been the talking point of many conversations.
Well, what question would you like to ask our next guest?
If you could be the drummer in any band of all time. Someone's already asked that. I can see it in your face.
No, but the next guest mightn't be a drummer. Right. That was my face. Was right. Oh, I'm going to have to ask you to reword that slightly.
Okay, right. Let me think of a better one then.
No, well, it's still an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a bit. I think I could do better. When was a time that you played with a drummer or even heard a drummer and you're like, whoa, I know what they're doing, but what's going on is so much more than those notes. What's going on here and how do I get more of it in my life?
That's an awesome question. Thanks. Yeah, that's really continuing the musical conversation and I like it. Well, Joe, we sort of like wrap up the podcast with 5 quick questions. I've been calling them like rapid fire, but then I've realized that like actually people want to think about it a little bit more sometimes. So if it's okay with you, just give me your gut.
Of course, yeah.
What's your favourite venue to play in Melbourne?
Recital Centre.
What is your dream venue to play at?
Like a festival in Spain, the Bienal de Sevilla.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What would be your coffee order?
At the moment it's been large oat latte.
What was your favourite place to get food after a gig in Melbourne?
I have to say, so Johnny and Richard, like their mum, Conchita, would make a bit of paella and some garlic prawns after the flamenco shows.
Oh, cool.
Absolutely unstoppable. Yeah.
Invite only.
Yeah, a little bit, but yeah.
That's cool. Okay, and finally, what's one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Oh, that's like... Jeez. I don't know if I can rapid fire that one. I think I would tell myself, and this is very much unique to me, there's a very big difference between the practice room and the performance space. Practice is all about looking at flaws, practice space is at least, and performance space is about putting all of your flaws behind you and just listening. That's what I need to hear.
Oh, well, thanks so much for sharing, Joe, and like all of your other stories and interests and the journeys. And I think that you're like a super inspiring musician and you make really great music that is unique to you and special, and like, I don't know, I feel like honored that you've come on the show to share this journey.
No, thanks for having me. Too kind. It's a great opportunity to be able to talk about it, actually. So thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Well, if anyone would like to, stay up to date with when you're playing, book you to play for them or with them, or just like come and see a show or the next project when you put it out, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Probably just through my Instagram. It's just my name, Joseph Batrouney. Very much reachable on there. I also have a website, josephbatrouney.com. Either of those two, equally good.
Awesome. All right, thanks so much for coming on the show, Joe.
Thanks, Luke. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on Our Drummers Musicians. I hope you enjoyed getting to know another Melbourne muso like I did. Help us grow by leaving a review, share the podcast with friends and family, and subscribe on our website for extra info. Got a guest you'd love to hear on the show? Please let us know at ourdrummersmusicians.com. See you next time.